Pressure. We've all been there. Up in the middle of the night with anxiety and tension about challenges we're facing in our businesses. In this video, we're going to look at how we unnecessarily do this to ourselves and how we, as conscious leaders, can free ourselves from this stressful time and energy-wasting burden. But before we jump in, let's take a slow, deep breath. As CEOs, we need to navigate unexpected challenges, and for the most part, we're highly capable of addressing whatever comes up. But some of the time, we get triggered by situations, and that reaction both creates pressure and diminishes the quality of our leadership. The worst type of pressure we usually feel is the pressure we put on ourselves. A major source of self-induced pressure comes from not wanting our circumstances to be as they are. Simply put, this is referred to as being in resistance to what is. The more our minds resist something, the more the pressure builds. As pressure builds, the more likely we are to become reactive, think less clearly, and stray from wise decision-making, all of which results in even more pressure. But let's take a closer look at what resistance to what is. In short, it's the experience of getting mentally and emotionally fixated about something we don't want or don't want to accept. Essentially, when we go into resistance, we take a stance of being against the very existence of something. Now, just for clarity, if you're thinking, but we should be against the existence of things like slavery, yes, of course, that's a different form of resistance. It's more values-based. What we're talking about here has to do with inner resistance to any aspect of what we're experiencing. That resistance builds tension in the body. It co-opts our attention and our focus, and it reduces our capacity to be clear-headed. All of these conditions can cause us to react in ways that are not in the best interest of ourselves or our companies. And every reactionary misstep brings the potential for greater pressure. Here's an example of how this could show up for us as leaders. Let's say we're in the middle of a major project, important customer, success will raise the likelihood that we'll get a lot of business from the same customer. It's a big step in our company's growth. Things are on track to meet the customer's tight time frame, but 2/3 of the way through to delivery, our lead project manager, who's absolutely central to the success of the project, unexpectedly resigns. Take a moment to consider what your initial reaction might be. Most leaders would exclaim, "No!" or groan, a clear signal that we've gone into resistance. The resistance is the wanting of things to be different than they are, and what drives the no is usually some attachment to an outcome, something we really want. If we slow things down, we'd be able to see that prior to going into resistance, there are typically a series of thoughts that fly by so quickly we don't even notice them. These thoughts are actually what generate the resistance. Thoughts like, without the project leader, we won't meet the deadline. We'll fail and lose that company's business. I may never find such a big opportunity. So the longer we allow those types of thoughts to loop, the more the pressure will build within us. And that pressure will cloud our judgment as well as cause us to be even more reactive. Another consequence is that the more pressure we feel, the more likely we are to pressure everyone else around us, in this case, to somehow still get the project done on time. All of this can create additional problems we'll have to deal with later, which even add more pressure. So you ask, how do we, as conscious leaders, minimize self-generated pressure? There will always be external pressures in business, but when we free ourselves from the self-induced pressure that being in resistance brings, we have a far greater capacity to be effective leaders. Instead of reacting against and saying no to what is, conscious leaders will say yes, acknowledging reality. Within ourselves, we'll absolutely accept that what is happening is happening. Doing so allows the body and mind to stay calm and clear. And most importantly, showing up in this way optimizes our ability to respond with all of our capacities unimpaired. In the example of losing our top project manager, instead of reactively getting caught up in a cycle of repetitive thinking about how bad the situation is, we would fully accept what was happening. All of our energy would stay available to assess and execute the best possible solutions to the challenge, which allows us to be responsive as opposed to reactively impaired. Saying yes is an empowered, empowering process through which we can realize that our situation has just taken a different shape. And this leaves us free to recognize that this is simply our next opportunity to be agile and to lead wisely. None of us are going to do this perfectly. Maybe in a parallel universe we will, but here we're all going to find ourselves in resistance from time to time. We're so used to it we don't even notice it. We certainly don't recognize it for what it is when we're inside of it. But here and now, we're changing this by raising our awareness. At some point, the discomfort of being in a state of inner resistance will grow strong enough for us to notice it. The moment we become aware we're in resistance becomes our next opportunity to practice accepting the isness of our situation, meaning that it simply is. The isness. Doing so is a big deal. We see it, we allow that it exists, and with that shift, we free ourselves to respond more wisely to whatever it is that's unfolding and requiring our attention. So let's try out some real-world practice of giving up being in resistance so you can experience less stress. Start by thinking of a time in your business when something went wrong, something that was important to you. It could be the loss of an important client or customer, failure of a launch, bad financial news, another workers' comp claim. Choose something. Now, with that in mind, can you remember the feeling of being in resistance, that sense of no to what's arising in you? Can you recall the pressure causing you to struggle with having clarity? Or did you become reactive, maybe in the way you spoke with someone, in a way that made things worse or generated even more pressure? Now, let's shift over to what's actually possible with the change in consciousness that occurs when we free ourselves from being in resistance to what is. Bring your awareness back in time to just before the beginning of that situation where you felt like saying no. But this time, when you first learn about what's happening, imagine yourself being the aware leader who can absolutely accept that it's occurring. Sense what your body might feel like being in this allowing, accepting state. Imagine what it would feel like to say from a neutral place, yes, this is happening. You don't have to like it, but because you're someone who prefers to live in reality instead of chaos that a mind in resistance generates, you fully accept that it's taking place. Can you feel how different that is? Can you feel the calm in your mind and your body? Can you sense how much clearer your mind is because brain power is not being wrapped up in railing against the situation? This leaves you free to more capably deal with the situation. Can you see how much more of a sane, high-functioning place this is from which to lead? The gift we provide ourselves when we let go of being in resistance is that we free ourselves to lead more wisely and be at the top of our game. And all this shift requires is greater self-awareness. I guarantee each and every one of us can do this well. See what happens when you experiment with this in real time. There's more content on the 𝗦𝗲𝗹𝗳-𝗶𝗲𝗃.com website, as well as info on how we can connect. I'll leave the link down below so you can check it out. Until then, enlighten up.